My name is Jeffrey St Laurent. This is the live Tuesday call, and as always, I'm thrilled to be able to work with coaches that are calling in. As what I do is I help coaches transition to a full-time business. And the topic today, I got my words mixed up there, right? The topic today is actually how to become a full-time coach this year. You know, as we're embarking upon the new year, going into the new year here. And there's so many people out there, so many coaches that I've been interacting with last year, and of course through different mediums, and they want it so badly, right? They want to become a full-time coach, and maybe you're just coming to that point where, like a couple people we talked to before the live call, it's just what, I've been wanting this for a while, and I went through a coaching school, and whatever the circumstances are, but like now it's time, and it's ready to go. And so what I'm hoping to give to you today are some good insights on some of the fundamentals that's going to hopefully get you a little bit more streamlined, so you can take a direction, because that's the biggest thing, is we need to have a direction. Before we get going, I just want to go over a few things. First, I always do record these calls, and I put them in my university, which is on my website, sellingcoaching.com. So if you go there, you can go to my university. I've got some fantastic information there for you, a lot of great resources. Additionally, another great resource when you go to sellingcoaching.com is right on the home page, is I have a free guide for you there. It's the ultimate startup guide for coaches. So you might want to check that out. You'll see right on the home page where I bribe you with my dog, my awesome dog Cosmo. But of course, it's a great resource you can download. It's an audio and video as well. At the top of every page at sellingcoaching.com, I have an invitation to my private Facebook group. Got a fantastic group of coaches in there, and I'm going to throw out some announcements over the next few weeks as to some cool, exciting things we're going to be launching as we are in the new year here as well. And then lastly, some of you are starting off, but for those coaches who have been doing it for a little while and you're starting to interact with leads, I have one of my great premier programs. It's a group program where I help you convert your leads into paying clients. And I do that in something called live sales conversations. So I have livesalesconversations.com, and you can check that out as well. That's a great group program, especially if you're in those sales conversations with leads, from events and or leads that you're getting and you're not quite sure how to navigate those. That's where I shine there. It's probably one of my biggest things that I love doing and teaching the most, is obviously the selling aspect of it, because I always relate everything back to, when we transition to a full-time business, I always relate it back to sales. So you can always check that out at livesalesconversations.com. So with that being said, let's jump into the topic and how to become a full-time coach in this year. And the reality is, first, how about this? I want to bring you to reality with a coaching business, with any business for that matter. But when it comes to a coaching business, and those of you that are students of mine know that I teach, what is our business? First, you want to understand the main objective of our business is to build an audience. Our business is our audience. So when you say, I want to have a coaching business, what I want you to start thinking is, I want to have an audience, right? You've got to have people in your audience. Call them your fan base, right? Call them your community, call them what you want, but it's your audience. And those are the people that, as you educate, as you develop relationships with, and as you help, begin to see value in what you do. And therefore, over time, what you can do is you can monetize that. When I say over time, doesn't mean you have to wait to make money from it. It just means that as you build an audience, when the timing is right for some of those people, that's when they can hire and or buy any of the services or products that you have. And typically when we start off, we have our one-on-one coaching. And I always recommend the best way to start off before you do any products, downloadable, physical products, anything like that. I always recommend starting off with one-on-one coaching, because not only is that you're going to get paid better initially, because obviously there's a higher price point when they hire you for one-on-one coaching, but additionally, that's the first way of how you're going to start to get to understand your audience and what their needs and wants are. Even when I started helping coaches transition to a full-time business, call it 3 years ago now, I had been doing my full-time coaching business at the time since 2004 full-time, and that's when, through a series of events, etc., I felt this calling to help coaches. I'd learned so much through my life coaching business and what I'd done full-time, and through interacting with them through a few situations, I found like, wow, there's a calling. I was really need for that, and obviously I I learned the art of and the skill set of selling, and I realized I'm like, wow, coaches need this. They need to understand, they need to learn selling. And even the things that I thought that they needed, or how about this, the things that I wanted to teach them initially, yes, they needed to know, but some of it was a little bit too premature, meaning, like I said earlier, the livesalesconversations.com, the group program that I'm doing, that's what I wanted to start off with. But then I realized, I'm like, wow, none of these coaches don't even know who they're going after, never mind have leads. All of them want clients, but it's like they're trying to run the marathon and they haven't even put their shoes on yet. They're just getting out of the shower. They don't even have any clothes on yet. So it's like we gotta take this step by step, right? So that's one of the greatest ways to start to understand your audience is to start speaking on whatever it is that you feel like you start speaking on, and then you start to understand as you interact with them more, and then obviously as they begin to hire you, that's you understand really where most of their needs are. So as we start off, I want you to be thinking, okay, if I'm going to be building a full-time coaching practice this year and moving forward to that, is I've got to build an audience, right? And so when we go about that is the first thing we got to do before we even figure out who that audience is, and I'm going to get to that in a few minutes, is I want to back up a little bit here, and I want you to really start to think about not only why you're doing this. That's a huge component. We always talk about our why and why we're going after why we do what we do. That's an important piece. Like for me, my why with helping coaches transition to a full-time business. I won't go into the depth of it now for the sake of conversation. You can always go to the about part on my website, sellingcoaching.com. I do a video there. Great way, and it's a great place for you to express your why in the about section of your website. But either way, we want to have a strong why, but also we've got to be serious about our plan, right? So we've got to take a look at this from a business perspective and saying, if I want to do this as a full-time business, what full-time business means to me now beyond the audience, right? So you say, okay, if you're going to have a coaching business, that's your audience, but what having a full-time coaching business is to me now beyond that, from a business perspective, is a full-time income, right? In other words, being able to support yourself and whatever financial responsibilities you have from the income you earn from that business. So it's not an hourly thing, meaning, oh, I'm working whatever, 40 hours a week in my business. It's not a full-time in that sense, but if I were to say it differently, a full-time coaching business would be a full-time income from your coaching business. So we have to realize that as the reality, where I wanted to pull you in from the beginning here. And when I say that is we got to look at our finances, right? Whatever financial situation you're in right now, you've got to take a look at, where are you earning money from? Is it a job, a full-time, part-time, whatever it is? What do you need on a monthly basis to cover your financial responsibilities? Who else is involved in that? Who else is contributing or can contribute to that or can help you with that, right? So it's, you're not probably in college anymore where you're just you can live in your car, you can live with your parents, or who knows, maybe that's the situation. But regardless of where you are, I want you to really take a closer look at your financial situation. I've done I've probably done a few calls now on creating a financial plan in my Selling Coaching University. So if you went to that sellingcoaching.com under the university, how to create a financial plan, just type in the search, creating a financial plan, and you should get a lot more details on that. Obviously, I'm not going to go into that right now, but one of the things you really got to start to realize is I've got to get serious about that. I know one of the guys on the call today, when we talked earlier, I've been working with him as a mentor now, call it 8-9 months, et cetera, or more. And one of the biggest things that he went through was just creating that financial plan. And that's why he is where he is and quit his job, last month, in December. So we've got to really get serious about that. And we've got to get really serious about how I can create that gap and what I need for financials. What's my financial tolerance, my financial risk. Whenever a coaching client, mentoring client comes to me and I start talking to them before they even hire me, I want to get a feel for their financial need in terms of, well, everyone's always, oh, I really want this, Jeff. I really want to create this full-time business. And I say, fantastic. Talk to me about your financial situation. Talk to me about your needs there and how pressing is it that you earn money now. Of course we want to earn money now. Of course we want to earn more money. Well, who doesn't, right? But the point is that you can't need the money now because you have to pay, your mortgage or your car bill or whatever the case is. You can't need a client to hire you, and so we need to have that patience, and that's where I want to bring you also back to that reality is that this is a slow grind. And I hate to say it like that, it's a slow grind. It doesn't mean things can't happen sometimes quickly, and you can't have breakthroughs in those moments where, wow, this happened, and we got some momentum going. But I want you to think about this as a slow grind, meaning when we build our audience, it's a person at a time. That's literally what it is. That's a person at a time. And I usually I say in that first 18 to 24 months of building that audience, like literally all I want you to do in that amount of time is I want you to build that audience one person at a time. And I want you to connect with each person. I want you to get to know them, get to understand them. Yes, we can be getting coaching clients in that amount of time. Don't start creating products in that amount of time. Understand your audience. Don't go nuts on a website. Don't spend a lot of money on anything. That's going to need to be changed. Start off with some of the fundamentals, basic website, basic free offer, things like that once you identify your audience. But start to understand them and start to connect with those people one person at a time, right? So that's where we're starting off from. But you've got to get in your head that this is a slow grind. Nothing's going to happen quickly. I sound like that parent who's like just pulling everything down. But I want to set you up with realistic expectations because the commercialized fitness and that's where I used to be in the fitness industry, but the commercialized coaching industry, just like any commercialized, like a fitness industry or you name it, right? And it's always good parallel to the fitness industry because it's always the quick fixes and do this in 60 days, in 90 days, in 5 days, flat abs in 5 days, or it's like, hey, get your first 5 clients in your first 30 days. Is it possible? Have people done it? Absolutely. Right? But I don't want to set you up with that expectation, right? So you got to get your mindset straight. You got to get your finances straight, your financial tolerance straight. You got to get your ducks in a row in terms of creating a financial buffer for yourself and a financial plan in terms of what you need from a monetary standpoint. And then when it comes to starting to dictate in terms of what you're going to charge for your coaching, a lot of coaches like, oh, I don't know what I should charge. Maybe I should start off at 75 for a session, for 100, or I don't know if that's too expensive. And where I want you to come from is from a business perspective, right? Like if you take a business outside of our business, right? A business is going to take a look at its overhead, its costs, in terms of rent, in terms of employee, in terms of products, in terms of, you fill in the blank. And from there, they can create their price structure, their business model around that. And what I want us to do is the exact same thing is we got to look at, I've worked with coaches as I mentor them and I say, hey, okay, you have a job right now. What are you earning? I've had coaches who have full-time jobs right now who are earning $300,000 a year. I've had coaches that are earning $50,000 a year. And they're looking to replace that salary. So if I'm looking to replace a $300,000 a year salary, I've got to, well, where's my coaching going to go? How's that going to impact who I'm going after and what I'm helping them with? It absolutely does, because if you're thinking about charging, $100 an hour for a session of your coaching, you're not ever going to replace that $300,000, you know what I mean, as coaching, just through your coaching products. You can start to scale as you move along, but we need an audience to get there. And if you want a chance in doing that, you got to start reevaluating, and you need a much higher price point. So who are we going after? Who can afford that service? What's the value you're bringing to that audience? So we've got to take into account those things. So what I'm suggesting here is as you start to take a closer look at your finances, as you start to take a look at creating that financial plan and looking at what you're replacing for income, we've got to start to look at, okay, how am I going to create my price structure from that? Obviously, those are the things, the details that I help when people work with me one-on-one with their mentoring as a mentor coach. But I want to start to give some of that to you now here so you can start creating a plan like that and start thinking about some of those things in that reality. Also, so when I start to give you some of that time frame, I'll give you that 18 to 24 months, let's just call it those 2 years, is I want you to think about those 2 years as a time frame for you to really start to gain some momentum and start to get some consistency in terms of income, consistency in terms of coaching clients, right? Yes, can you get coaching clients in your first week? Absolutely. You know what? Get out, do a speaking event, get yourself in front of a handful of people, a dozen people, and can you get a client from that? Absolutely. Can you do that again the next week or the week after? Absolutely. You getting clients is only a matter of and a measure of how quickly and consistently you can get in front of people on a daily, weekly, monthly basis, right? I always tell people, hey, you want 5 clients? Speak in front of 100 people. Do it 1 at a time, do it 5 at a time, do it 100 at a time. But speak in front of 100 people, you should be able to get a good 5 clients from that in the next couple weeks as you follow up, right? Can you do much better than that? Absolutely. Can you do worse than that? Absolutely. But that's just the statistic that I've learned since doing this full time since 2004. So The point being is yes, you can get clients, but you need that 18 to 24 months to gain some consistency of that. In other words, in that amount of time, you want to start to create what I like to call your marketing engine. Your marketing engine is as having a structure to what you're doing to get yourself out there in front of people on a consistent basis. So you're marketing yourself, but what I like to do is I like to call it education-based marketing. Look at the Live Tuesday call, what you're doing right here, right? This is how I market myself, right? This is how I get my message out there. I'm not out there just saying, hey, hire me as your mentor coach. I can help you transition to a full-time business, and here's what I can do, right? I'm actually giving you some valuable education, right? And so that's what I want you to start doing but you got to create a structure to that, right? You got to create a structure so that you're doing it on a weekly basis, no matter what's going on, right? There comes in that consistency over time. Right, so we create that marketing structure, and over that 18 to 24 months, that's where we start, building that audience. Like I said, a person at a time, interacting with that. That's the grind. It's the dirty work, as I say. I remember last week on my live sales conversations, small group that I was talking about. I was showing them behind the scenes of kind of like, we share a screen on there because it's on a video-based platform where we can see each other, we can share screens. So I was on there and I was sharing my screen and I was going through kind of an email thread with a coaching client of mine and how I kept them on as a client moving forward and some of the strategies there. But I was showing them those conversations and some other emails that I've done with clients so that not only I could teach them, but to show them like this is the reality of the business, right? The reality of the business that's the grind, like that's the dirty work. It's one person at a time. It's having those conversations. So I don't want you to think it's like you're gonna go out and you speak in front of 100 people and then they're all gonna get on your email list and then you're gonna do that a handful of times and you're gonna have 1,000 people and you're gonna send out a couple emails and they're gonna just all hiring you, right? That's not how it works. How it works is starting to have those conversations one person at a time, right? So that's that grind. But what I want you to do is when I talk about that marketing engine, is I want you to be doing consistent, you got to be consistently emailing your audience as you start to grow. You got to be consistently getting, education out there on a weekly basis. I use the platform of my Live Tuesday call as an example, right? So we start doing that on a consistent basis. We start to attract new people. They start to, become a part of our community, become a part of our audience, but we're in front of them on a weekly basis. And so what that does is that allows us now to not only develop a fan base, but we're starting to build value for what we do as a coach. And then what happens is with that engine, because it's consistently humming and we're tuning it, we're not revving it, going super fast or just taking a break and stopping. It's that consistency. It's like your heart, right? But yeah, your heart can go higher and lower, but at the end of the day, there's an average, right? And it's always beating and it never stops, hopefully. So that's the same thing with our engine here is we got to get the engine going. And when I say that 18 to 24 months that's that time frame to develop rapport, develop relationships, and we have that engine going. So what happens is over time, with people in our audience, the timing becomes right for them, right? So as I said earlier, I relate everything back to selling. And selling is, you'll hear me say many times, from a fundamental understanding is really three things, but I'll start with the two of them. One is the need that the person has. And assuming you've identified your audience well and you know who you're going after and helping them with what specifically, right? They're coming to you and they're part of your audience. It's a given they have a need, right? So I help coaches transition to full-time. Obviously, if someone's a part of my Facebook group, et cetera, they're part of my email community, they're a full-time coach, right? Or they want to be a full-time coach. They're in that arena. They're thinking about it. They're dabbling with it, right? They're somewhere along it. So there's an inherent need. But where they become a potential client or a potential for, let's say, another product or service that I offer is when the timing's right for them. Point being, I know one of the people that called in today, they're like, hey, I've been following you for almost a year. I've listened to some of your calls. I listened to a call this morning. And, I've been thinking about this for a while, but then all of a sudden, it's like this week, today, it's like, what, am I going to do this or am I not going to do it? What that means is the timing was right. All of a sudden he calls in, shows up to a live call, right? Who knows where it goes from there? But the point is that's a great example of 18 to 24 months. That's just one person, a snippet of a year. You following me? So my message here is that over the course of time, when you're consistently have that marketing engine, meaning you're getting that education out there on a weekly basis, and it's a grind. I'll tell you, it is a grind. Last week, my girlfriend's been sick for 2 weeks. As you can tell, I'm not feeling that great. I'm a little bit stuffy, a little chest congestion. But am I doing the live Tuesday call? I'm here, right? I got some medication in me, and I'm going at it, right? Could I have easily said, I don't feel good? I was just lying on the couch literally till 11:45. I jumped in the shower, and I'm like, all right, I'm on in 15 minutes, right? So it's that grind. It's the email after email, and it's when everything's going well, you do it, and it's a lot easier when everything's going well. When there's 25 people that show up to the live Tuesday call, and it's like, whoa, people are dinging on, people are saying, hey, what's up? And it's a party on here. And then when there's 1 or 2 people that call in, right, or maybe no one that calls in, it's like the show still moves on, right? That's what I'm talking about. It's the grind. It's easier when things are happening. It's easier when, oh my God, I just got a few clients. You're excited and revved up. But what about all of a sudden it's a week, it's 2 weeks, it's 2 months, it's 3 months, and all of a sudden you haven't gotten a new client. And it happens. It happens. And no matter what phase of your business. I mean, it hasn't gone that long for me in a while, but I remember even, a handful of years back, I just like, geez, I haven't got a client. And then, I look at the date of my last new client, and I'm like, geez, it's been like 2 months. Or it's been like 3 months since I got a new client. And it doesn't mean I had like renewals in there. Like I didn't have, some existing clients continue on with me, right? So I did have some, I did get paid in there sometimes, but sometimes it's a while. And that's why that 18 to 24 months, and then obviously the longer you do it from there, is you need that consistency, because all of a sudden when you've got enough people in there, and when I say enough people, I mean, I'm talking, hundreds of people, maybe 1,000 people, right? Do you want more? Absolutely. Do I want to create a much larger audience? Absolutely. But it's not about the sheer volume of your audience. It's not, you hear about these marketers and they've got, 50,000, 100,000, 500,000, million people plus, right? You see these Facebook groups out there, or these Facebook pages with, 1 million likes, 3.5 million likes. It's like, yeah, that's another whole level of playing the game, right? But what I'm talking here is I'm talking, hey, if you had a couple hundred people on your email list and they were engaged, I mean, think about this. Fill a room up with 200 people. Heck, fill a room up with 25 people or 50 people. I don't know if you've ever been in a room, but that's good. I'd take a room of 50 engaged people any day over a list of 500,000, and a small percentage of them are engaged. Obviously, a small percentage of a bigger number is great. But the point being is I want to also give you the reality that in order to do this thing, in order to create a healthy 6-figure income, you don't need thousands and thousands of people. I've been able to create a healthy 6-figure income with less than 2,500 people or so on my email database for a long time. I had more at some points, through my coaching practice, but the reality is not all those people were engaged, not all those people were relevant for my audience, because I was going through, so many different audiences and different speaking engagements. Point being is you don't need, hundreds of thousands of people or even multiple 5-figure, audience numbers, right? So I want you to think about one person at a time, take the time, engage with those people, give them some good value, and do that consistently over time. Create a model that's manageable for you, right? So as you start to move forward, and I talk about this marketing engine that we're creating here, like my Live Tuesday calls, right? Live Tuesday call, it's a manageable thing for me. I can get on a call, I can come up with a topic, and as long as I have a good topic and I just have an idea of where I'm going, I can just go off and I can go down that direction, right? It can be valuable education. But for some of you, that wouldn't be, oh my God, I couldn't do an hour call, right? So some of my clients, I'll be like, hey, let's do a 10-minute Facebook Live. I mean, let's do whatever it is that you can manage to get out there. Maybe you're a writer. I've got mentoring clients that I work with that are like, oh, Jeff, I couldn't speak on the phone for the life of me or get on a video, but I can write. And I'll say, okay, well, let's start writing. Just know that at some point you've got to have to be able to speak, right? You've got to be able to talk. I'm not saying to do these calls or things like that, but those of you that are students of mine, I'll always tell you, as a coach, the way you're going to get clients is you got to be speaking in front of people. It could be in a virtual platform. It could be video, it could be something like this, or it's face-to-face live, any of those platforms. But you've got to be able to speak your education. That's why for so long in my private Facebook group, and you can always check that out from the top of my website, sellingcoaching.com, if you want to check that out if you haven't been there. But the reason I've always done something called a visibility challenge in there, which is challenging coaches, is to create videos. I don't care what they're creating a video on initially if they don't know where they're going with it, but you've got to just start getting that practice and get through that awkwardness, right? Because we've got to speak our message. So hopefully you're starting to get a real good feel for kind of this grind that I'm talking about here, but it's not like a painful grind. That's why sometimes I hate to use those words, but it's a place where you got to realize that this is, you're building these blocks one at a time, and it's building a building out of bricks. You just throw it all up there. There's a plan to it, there's a structure to it, and there's that consistency. And even when you've got a lot of consistency in there, at some points it can feel really slow, and it can almost feel like nothing's happening. So it's really important to just get in that focus and stay consistent with it. As we start to move forward, if I rewind a little bit and I talk about that audience, remember I said the whole objective is we're building that audience, is now I want you to start thinking about I always go back to this, is you've got to understand who you're going after, right? You got to understand who you're going after and what you help them with specifically. And this is I would say, honestly, the biggest challenge as a coach initially, outside of their own personal challenges, meaning if I separate it and say, what are your biggest obstacles to become a full-time coach, right? One biggest obstacle, and it will always be our biggest obstacle as a human being, but more so as an entrepreneur, is dealing with our own psyche, right? It's dealing with our own psyche and the things we tell ourselves inside of our head. Typically they're lies, right? Because they're fear-based. It's those insecurities, it's those doubts, it's those overwhelmed feelings, right? It's those negative beliefs, it's the beliefs that limit us, right? That's the biggest challenge as an entrepreneur. 100% bar none. It's those negative beliefs we have about ourselves, those insecurities, right? That's one biggest obstacle, right? It's easily attainable to get through it, right? It doesn't mean that can stop us. That's what we do as coaches, right? We can ask ourselves questions, right? We can shift our perspective. We can choose differently. We can be more of a conscious and conscientious human being. We can be present versus being always playing in the past or playing in the future. And instead of being fear-based, we can be present. We can breathe. We can be centered. We can be grounded. And in the present, there's no fear. In the present, there's none of that stuff. There's only what's real. That's where we can take that place. So that doesn't have to beat us, but that's part of the work that we do on a daily basis. I'll tell you, as I still deal with some of that stuff all the time, but the reason I can get through that and the reason I've been successful with it is because I can tame myself, right? I can get myself down, and I can breathe, and I have my own strategies because I understand myself well of how to get the better of those voices, and they do become less and less. But I'll tell you, I've told my life coaching clients this now and then, I said, what if they never go away? What if these fears, what if these insecurities, what if they never go away? Doesn't mean they have to control you anymore, but what if they never go away? What if you knew that they would always be around, right? Because it doesn't have to stop you, but if you can accept the fact that maybe they never will go away, that's fine. So how do we beat them? How do we go work around them? How do we work through them? How do we never allow them to get the better of us? So that's one of the biggest obstacles, which when I say is easily tamed, that's the work we do. That's the personal development side, etc. Then there's the other side, right? And it might be funny here in this side-by-side is it's starting to determine our audience, who we're going after with what specifically. And it kind of sounds comical as I say it out loud. It's like we've got this big side of our psyche and all that other stuff. And then you're saying, wow, Jeff, the other's biggest challenge is figuring out who we're helping with what specifically. And I'm kind of laughing because, yeah, that's what it is. And honestly, I mean, I went through it, and it seems like every single coach that I've ever spoken with, like that's their biggest challenge, other than what I just spoke about there, is who am I going after? It's the niche, so to speak, right? But I don't like to call it a niche because at the end of the day, a niche is for some people, it's just like almost like a category, like health or business or corporate, right? But we're talking like, who do you help with what specifically? And so we've got to get down to, narrow that down, and at some point we've got to decide. And deciding there, it's not like, oh my God, I'm marrying this woman or this man for the rest of my life, this population. It means that we've got to decide that, okay, this is where I'm going and who I'm going after. And this is what I'm helping them with specifically, and recognize that as I start to go into that, there's only so much you can decide without application. And so especially as you're listening to this right now, and obviously if you're listening to this, you're thinking like, all right, I want to become a full-time coach this year, right? And I want to move forward. And most likely, other than the psyche stuff, if you will, like the personal challenges, the mindset, etc., what's holding you back is, who am I going after? Who am I really helping? And obviously, those two also are very tied, intricately woven together, because then it's like when I do start to pick maybe that who in that population, then it starts to be like, who am I to help these people? Who's gonna think my information? Who's gonna think I'm valuable enough to pay me thousands of dollars to do whatever with them or to coach with them? Right, so obviously they're woven together, but we've got to start to work with these two, simultaneously to start to move forward. But either way, what I'd say is you've got to get to that point where you've just got to trust it enough. And that's why when I work with my mentoring clients is obviously I bring in my marketing background of as a coach and the selling aspect of it in terms of letting them pass the barometers that I know that it needs to pass in order to really say, okay, yeah, we've got something here. Let's start to move with it. But obviously there's a point where we've just got to, all right, we've got to trust that this is where we're going, and we got to start to get out there. And that's, as I said earlier, tying that back in there, is just that's how we begin to understand our audience better, and we start to understand our message better. If you're in that place right now where you get stuck and you can't feel like you're moving forward, the best thing I could tell you now is especially if you can't even decide on that who piece, is I want you to start to create some information. I want you to start to write. I want you to start to create a video. I want you to start expressing yourself, even if it's simply telling a story. Even if it's telling a story about, hey, tell me about your holiday. Tell me about what did you do on New Year's? Tell me about what you saw when you were shopping at the mall. Tell me about, you fill in the blank, when your son or your daughter or your spouse this. And tell me and animate that story and make it exciting. And tell me get into some of the details from it. Tell me what you learned from it. Tell me something think back to the time in college or, in high school when, you hit the winning shot at the basketball game, or when, you had your first kiss, or, you fill in the blank of a really high or really low moment in your life or in someone else's life that you knew and that you cared about, and then tie it together with a story and or point. And you'll start to realize like, wow, you can do this. That's all this coaching thing is starting to share stories and then tying it back to a relevant point. If you're part of my email community, said differently, if you're on my email list, right? But it's my community because I communicate with you on a weekly basis multiple times, right? But if you're on my email community and you get my emails, start reading some of them. Not because I just want you to read them, but just start to see how I communicate. Start to see how I share things. I share some personal things about my son, about my girlfriend, about my life, and then I share I just go right into things, and I just go into education, or I talk about situations, I talk about frustrations, I just talk about being a human being. And what I always do is I relate them back to something that a coach, my audience who's looking to do this thing full time, could relate to or could benefit from. And I tie that into a point. It's something that I learned, and I give some advice and I give some thoughts. And sometimes when we think about ourselves as coaches, it's like, oh, but as a coach, I'm not supposed to give advice, right? I'm not supposed to give opinions. I'm not supposed to have an agenda. I'm not supposed to have any of that stuff, right? It's supposed to be about the client, right? But at the end of the day, that's where you pull from your life and your experiences, and you start to share some of those things. And then even if your point or your advice can be asking some questions, don't be afraid to have an opinion. Don't be afraid to take a stance on something, because people are going to relate to that. And even if they don't agree with it, right? There's things that I teach or I talk about. That doesn't mean that the coaches listening to my stuff will be like, oh my gosh, that's exactly the way it should be done, and there's no other way of doing it. Yeah, there's other ways of doing things, right? These are the ways that through studying that and understanding the business and looking at working with a lot of different other people and seeing a lot of different models, things that I've done and found success with, and also with understanding different business models. I always work with coaches, and it doesn't mean that the way I do it is the way I help people and teach people all the time, because people have different situations that they need to work through, right? But we need to decide to go down a path. But either way, this is how I start to pull that out. And if I have an opinion or a strong stance on something, and I say, hey, there's no other way, I always tell a mentoring client of mine, I was like, hey, like even last week I had a new client, and they were talking about not having an email list. They had a big resistance to it, because they just get emails all the time from other people, and they're just like, oh my God, I don't want to be like that, because they just think they're just bombarding people with information that they don't want. And I told them flat out, I'm like, hey, you can go for another opinion, you can go hire somebody else, but at the end of the day, if you don't have an email list, you don't have a business, because how else are you going to communicate with your audience? And yeah, you can use social media, but you don't own social media. Like you own your email list. You have access to those people. Yes, they can unsubscribe at will, but the point is, if they want to be there, they're there. And if you don't have that, you do not have a business. And so I was really strong on that standpoint, because I'm like, you can go find someone else who's going to tell you, yeah, you don't need an email list, because maybe they just want to get you to hire you. Maybe they just want the sale, but I'm not willing to do that. Right? So what I'm telling you is the same thing: is take a stance, have an opinion, have your own agenda. But then obviously when you work with somebody, you can be that coach. You can be objective and non-judgmental and have on their agenda, etc. But I'm telling you, just take a stance. Start sharing some stories and seeing where that leads to. And what I found about this business and entrepreneurship, as I start to wrap this up, is I'd say this, is entrepreneurship is not a journey that you can predict. It's not a journey that you can plan or really even prepare for. There's some preparation, obviously, but when you're out there, when I would say out on the court, I coach my son's basketball team now. He's 11 years old, 6th grade, and as an athlete myself, it's like you can practice and prepare all you want, and that's all the behind the scenes stuff. But when you walk on the court, and the ref blows the whistle, so to speak, you can't plan and prepare for that, and it's unpredictable. And you can have all the plays and the strategies in the world, but when it's live, it doesn't go to plans most of the time. And if you're so caught up in that, then you're not going to be able to survive this game and this world of entrepreneurship, because it's hard and it's cold and it's rash sometimes and it's not fair sometimes. But you just got to go with it, and you've got to begin to learn how to just play. And sometimes you win, sometimes you lose, but we learn more from those failures. And it's learning to accept those and deal with those. And that's where the two sides come from. But on that personal side is learning how to adapt in that moment, how to be in that moment. And sometimes, just like an athlete, you're going to get in that zone, right? You're going to feel that fire, and you can't will yourself there. It just happens. It's created, and it's created from being in that moment. And sometimes you're going to want to get there so bad, but you can't, no matter how hard you try. And you just got to accept that it's one of those times, or you're just having a bad game. Like I said, as I watch basketball with my son too, the professionals, it's like you watch these superstar athletes who have these, $200 million 5-year, contracts that are, making more money literally in a day than we will in several years sometimes. And it's just like they have really bad days sometimes, and they're just really off, and they're the worst player out there. But you know what? It doesn't mean that's going to happen all the time, and they get through that slump and they move forward. And that's what we got to do as an entrepreneur. And we just got to recognize it and just laugh at it and make fun of it, and just get out of the office, go watch a movie, go have some fun, and come back and do it again the next day.